around you. Look at this. We created this. This didn't exist before we were here.
That's right. And it's episode 18 of For Our Edification. Thank you for downloading this edition of For Our Edification. I'm Eddie Francis. For Our Edification is brought to you with the support of the Purposeful Philanthropy Foundation. And you can get the podcast on your favorite platform. That would be Podbean. It could be Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and more. And if you want to check out a past episode, then make sure you go to eddiefrancis.com/ForOurEdification. So, I had this awakening a few months ago. I checked out this documentary called The Creative Brain, and in it, a neuroscientist by the name of David Eagleman explored how our brains engage in the creative process. Now, he went beyond talking to creatives. Eagleman actually talked to a scientist. He talked to an educator. He also talked to an inventor. And you know what? The documentary had this profound impact on me because I've always looked at creativity as kind of this, I guess I can say, accoutrement of life or career. I never looked at it as a vital part of what we do. I mean, to me, you did some really important stuff like math or science. And if you were creative, then that was a plus. But creativity, as it turns out, is much, much more than that. So, to really dig into this, I reached out to a couple of friends of mine. The views and opinions expressed on For Our Edification do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the hosts, guests, or any entities with which we are affiliated. Khalilah Elliott and Jamal Sterling are hosts of Whatever We Want with J and K. Khalilah is the founder and chief disruptor of Gafford Communications, a firm focused on providing clients with marketing and communication strategies with an emphasis on multicultural marketing and audiences and corporate social responsibility. Jamal, he's an award-winning actor, educator, and voiceover artist. And I met both of these people when I performed in a couple of plays at Dillard University back in the day in the 90s, when it was known as the University Theater at Dillard
University. And you both had a lot more hair, I think, at that point.
Yeah, we did. We both had a lot more hair. The hair, you know, the salt and pepper.
Actually, I guess I can say we all had more hair back then.
I know. We did. Man, what's up with y'all?
Nothing. Man. Thank you for having us on today. We're excited.
So listen, so there was this thing that hit me one day. I was watching this documentary called The Creative Brain. Mm-hmm. And The Creative Brain did this really good job of laying out how creativity is present in our lives all the time, but we just don't always see it. We don't recognize it as creativity. I mean, the documentarian talked to scientists and other folks, some people who weren't even in creative fields, but what he focused on was how creativity really helped them do their work. And Khalilah, I thought of you because I saw a great interview that you did for Dillard, and it was with one of Dillard's esteemed alumni, and there was some stuff in there. There was some really good stuff in there about creativity. And then I listened to the podcast,
our crazy podcast.
Yeah, against my better judgment, I listened to it. And
it's not for the faint at heart.
But you two, I mean, your conversations about film, about stage, about pop culture, about music, everything. It is so funny and so rich and so real. And I'm sitting here going, these two, they got these brains that just go and they don't stop, unfortunately, they don't stop.
I know, right. Right. There's a downside to that.
There is a downside. I thought it would be really cool to talk to you two, though, because remembering you from Dillard, your energy, both of y'all got such cool energy. And I thought, man, it would be really cool to talk to y'all about the role that creativity plays in your lives. But there's this other part. And I ran this past Khalilah via inbox on Facebook. And I said, but we got an issue. In the Black community, creativity is treated as something and that's pretty whimsical and sometimes even useless.
Yes.
And I was like, we got to talk about this. Mm-hmm. I mean, we really, really have to talk about this. So quick story before to get it all kicked off. And this to set the table. So my mom, my late mother, love her dearly, obviously, but she had this thing. She was a science and math teacher. And for her, if I wanted to get a job, I needed to do something that had some real it has some real potential in her eyes, right? And I'll never forget, my mother was asking me about college and what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I told her, I want to be an actor. And she said, boy, you're going to be in a soup line for the rest of your life.
So you want to be broke.
Right.
I know that feeling well. Yes.
Right. And so, and I'm not going to lie, I was mad with her for years over that comment because I really, really wanted to be an actor. I mean, y'all saw me when I was performing with Billy. I enjoyed it.
And you were great.
Thank you very much.
I was
great. No, but,
we didn't shout out the loose cannons days.
Oh God! Okay, don't get the loose cannons.
Jamal knows where the bodies are buried, ladies and gentlemen.
New Orleans' most versatile comedy troupe.
Yes, sir.
But you know what? But I think this is a conversation that a lot of Black folks have with one another, especially with parents. And I think a lot of times you have a lot of people who are very creative. They have all this creative energy, and it gets doused, unfortunately and unwittingly, when they don't realize that creativity is not just limited to stage, it's not just limited to music, it's not just limited to marketing, it's not just limited to PR and all that. Creativity is everywhere.
Absolutely.
Jamal, I'm going to start with you. You're an educator. And I'm going to come right from the hip on this one. I mean, I don't think a lot of people think of education as a creative space. Would you agree with that?
I think a lot of people think of it as a very core subjects only, and the electives are like the spice of life, right?
Yeah.
But really, in my experience with education, the kids come to school because they want to get on the stage, they want to play the instrument, they want to write the speech, they want to whatever creative space whatever creative art that they're into. That's the reason they're there.
Yeah.
The other stuff is lagniappe. It's like, okay, well, I gotta do math, I gotta do English, but man, I can't wait to get on the stage. Man, I can't wait to play that guitar. That's the sell. That's the reason that they're really
most kids don't wake up in the morning and go, oh my God, I get to go to math class today.
Algebra.
That's not typically the response for the
but see, even the ones who do get excited about math and science, there's this creative part of them that really helps them manage the math and the science. Like they have to get creative about their formulas, about figuring out how this problem was. And that's what this documentary just got me so excited about, because I'm sitting here going, holy crap, creativity matters to everybody. It really, really does. So
our geniuses think outside the box. They're always pushing boundaries, right?
Right.
So if when you're writing that speech, when you're doing that equation or whatever, the creative brains come from a different angle and makes their work pop.
Yeah.
I mean, even when you think about like science and technology, to your point, Eddie, like when you think about the Steve Jobs and the, and the, what's his name, the Bill Gates, like that, those are creative people. Like they saw a problem that no one else was paying attention to or no one else was speaking to, and reached into the recesses of their mind where that creative space was, and was like, how do I problem solve this? Right. Like even that, something that is very technologically based is still the answer comes from a creative space. So.
But there was a really cool story about Apple, and about how Apple had been developing this technology and it was second to none. The problem was the product design was garbage.
Right.
And so what they did is they brought in artists, and they had them do the schematics for the iPhone and all the laptops and the desktops and everything. And that's what got Apple over the top.
Right.
It was those sleek designs that they gave all of their tech that made people say, oh, I got to go get me an iPhone. I'm going to stand in this line for 5 hours.
I mean, I will tell you as a marketer, I tell people all the time, a former Apple reform, I've been reformed from Apple, but I tell people all the time, their technology isn't better than like Samsung or Androids or whatever. It's just their branding is better. Their branding is so much more better. So to your point about leaning into that creativity, they recognize we've got a great scientific or technological product, but how do we get it into the hands of people? How do we convince people that this is something they must have? To now it's to the point to where people are into the cult of Apple, right? Just because of that branding. Yeah. Jamal, yes.
Way deep. Trying to get out.
It's created civil wars and all kinds of family. Are you an Android user or are you an Apple user, right?
Okay, so I do have this in my house, by the way. So I was an Android guy. I didn't really care though. But my wife, she did this force majeure thing in the house, and we all wound up being Apple people. And I'm like, fine. My son, though, is holding out. My son, God bless this kid, he is holding out. And he's just like, nope, no Apple.
I'm with him. I was like, Android's technology and functionality is better, but the branding, you can't argue the branding of Apple. So
well, at this point, Apple has all of my music. It's too much. I'm too old to change. I can't do it anymore. Oh.
But think about this. So when you look at an Apple interface versus a PC interface or an Android interface, Apple, they have these sleek designs that subconsciously you're sitting here thinking, this is better. This has got to be better.
Speaking to, again, when you going back to your original point, human beings are naturally drawn to creativity. We naturally have that, even if we are, like you said, even if our brains are, there's the left brain, right brain. So even if you are someone who is more left brain, you can appreciate a beautiful piece of art, right? Like even if you don't know how to actually create that piece of art, even if you don't know how to write a script, you're watching movies, you're drawn in. So creativity has a way, and we of course are talking about it from the perspective of which we always experience it or generally experience it as artists. But to your point, creativity and expression of creativity is everywhere. I buy fresh flowers every week for myself to sit on the edge of my desk. That's creativity, right? It's open. Yeah, I mean, it's something I do to treat myself, right? But I use it as a form of expression, right? Like, so while we think of creativity in the traditional sense of like, okay, you're going to be an artist or what have you, creativity, to your point, is all around us. When a mom cooks a meal, like if she's creating that recipe out of the top of her head, and I'm saying mom, it could be dad, whoever, that is an expression of creativity. And I think what gets lost often in a conversation is we think of it in these very traditional, not silos, but these traditional manners in which it's presented to us, and it without realizing you experience creativity all day, every day in your everyday life.
So Khalilah, you're gonna really feel me on this one, okay? I have this joke so just so folks know, I mean, I'm the communications and marketing director at Khalilah and Jamal's alma mater, Dillard. And
woohoo! Shout out.
do you?
So the thing that I always say, and I know I'm going to wind up making somebody mad one day because I keep saying this publicly, and I do it for a reason.
We always tell people don't add us.
Yeah, I keep saying this publicly, and I know somebody's going to come up to me one day and say, that thing you keep saying, I kind of feel some kind of way about it. But Khalilah, this is what I always tell people about marketing and communications. The mistake that people make with us is they see us as the arts and crafts shop. They don't see us as a strategic arm.
Yes.
They don't see us as a strategic business arm.
Yes.
So everybody comes to us like, where's the marketing plan? And
right.
And it's like, well, you know what? Here is coming right out my butt. Here's the marketing plan. Since you asked me for it 5 seconds
Eddie, you
ago.
are preaching my language right now.
But what people don't understand is that the creative part of Marcom, that's the result of the strategy.
Come on.
That's the result of it. It's not the strategy.
Marketing people everywhere like, yes, preach, brother, preach. Yes, the creativity flows from the technology, going back to the Apple model, right? You start with whatever the technology is or whatever the science is or whatever the academic, intellectual thing is. And before we started this call, I was like, so who's your target audience? Just trying to put these pieces in place to understand who are we talking to. So you lay out all these technical things, and then you can sit back and go, okay, from a creative space now let's think about, well, what will that audience respond to? Where do they like all of that flows out of starting from. So it's so interesting. I'm going back to what you were saying about where your mom's feelings, not unlike my parents. I'm sure Jamal could talk about this. Not unlike every artistic kid, for the most part. There's always the exception, but most artistic kids, I think in particular in our community, in the Black community, have this panic. Right. Yeah. The minute you tell your parent, I want to be an artist, every Black parent goes, oh my God, Every parent has that. And I think it's because of a not understanding, a lack of understanding about how the creative part of that work comes after all of the foundational stuff. Jamal can talk about this as an actor. People just see the finished product. They don't see all the labor that he puts into
the craft.
Yeah, the craftsmanship. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so the creative is funny because one of the things that the documentary said was, creativity solves problems. And Jamal, I'm going to take you back. I'm going to take you way back. J.D. Jackson.
You gotta say it right. J.D.
Jackson. So
the J.D. Jackson.
So for people know, there was this play I did at Dillard. It was called Shades of Grey.
Shades of Grey. Wambu stage manager, J.D. Jackson. I know.
So it was Shades of Grey, and I'll never forget. J.D. told me something that really made me realize the power creativity can really have, and it was kind of freeing actually. But I remember I was up and I was doing a part of the play, and I'm doing it, and J.D. says, "Eddie, you're holding back." And I was like, no, man, I'm good. He said, no. He said, I'm not getting, he said, I know something else is there. I need to see more. And so he said, I would rather you give me too much so that I can just go ahead and peel back some layers rather than you not give me enough and I have to give you layers.
Yes.
And I have used that repeatedly throughout my career when it comes to coaching people, working with people, and all of that good stuff. But the thing about it is that, it made sense to me later on, and I want you to comment, Jamal, about the process part of acting. People see the finished product of acting. Right. They look at the movie, they see what Chadwick Boseman did, they see what Denzel did, and they're just like, oh, he good, right?
Right.
So, but they don't see the actual process, which is a process. I mean, there is a little bit of science to it when it comes to developing a character. They don't see the psychology. They don't even see that there might be a hint of sociology in developing this character. So talk about what that process is like, Jamal, because you are a working actor.
It is 1,000% investigative. And I come from the school of J.D. Jackson as well. And I've been on the same side where J.D.'s like, nah, man, it needs to be more. This is a dude. It's funny. J.D. seems like he's way older than us. He's like 1 or 2 years older than me. And you're older than him, right?
I'm older than J.D. That's what tripped me out. I was like, hold on.
But he has this wisdom about him that he's always had.
I was like, hold on, little hopper. You ain't got to tell me how to do my thizzle. I know what I'm doing.
Right now, I'm sure everybody in the audience is like, who's JD Jackson? They're like, Google.
Google JD Jackson. He is right now, he is one of the best voiceover artists in the game as far as doing voiceovers for books. So what do they call it? Audiobooks. So JD and audiobooks are a gigantic thing. He's also a brilliant actor.
Yes.
Done a bunch of TV, done a whole bunch of films and stuff like that. But his process is something I hold on to this day, is that exhaust every single possibility.
Yeah.
And I don't think this just goes, to your point, Eddie, this doesn't just go for theater, it goes for life.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I come to teach my students, I have backup plan amongst backup plan amongst backup plan, because you exhaust every possibility because you don't know what you'll need when.
Right.
Same thing when developing a character. You exhaust every avenue. Where does this character come from? Who are they? What are their parents like? What's their socioeconomic status? Yeah. What type of shoes do they wear? What do they hang out? What park do they go to? Is these things that, like right now, I'm taking a drive up to Tulsa in about a week for a character I'm about to play. I'm just going to drive up there because in the play, they do a drive to Tulsa and see a gigantic McDonald's. I want to know what that feels like, So as an actor, you're not coming from a place of always making things up. Sometimes they become lived truths because you put yourself in that lived truth. So and to go back to creativity, it's these, I imagine Steve Jobs when he first gets the idea for the iPad or the iPhone and thinking, okay, we want this device to do this. Mm-hmm. How do we make sure we exhaust every avenue to see, we prototype this device, how many levels of prototype they go through to make this perfect product. So it's not just here's the iPhone, figured out. It's a years long labor, maybe, decades long labor Same thing with developing a character. It could be a 6 month to a year to 2 year. You look at somebody like Chadwick Boseman. What was the last movie he did?
Was it Ma Rainey's Black Bottom?
Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. That was literally a lifetime in the making. They got stuff. Phyllis Rashad talking about him doing that monologue back at Howard.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
So literally all his life, he's been building little pieces to make that character, right? But it's just I've been talking for a very long time.
No. If I could just tag into that
gumbo, though.
But if I could just jump in here, Jamal, and just add to that, not to mention, if you want to go back even further to August Wilson's writing of that work, right? Yeah. And how long it took him to be able to pull that character out, writing this 10,
fleshing it out.
Absolutely.
Especially somebody like August who didn't become a great, he wasn't known until his late 40s, early 50s.
Right, right.
So that thing had been boiling up for over 30 or 40 years. Before he creates his masterpiece.
It's almost like if you know people who do track and field, they train forever for a race that's going to take 10 seconds.
That's right. That's right. We're watching people right now try out for the Olympics, and
10 seconds if it goes well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I can't think of time right now. But it takes them all that time. It takes them all that time to when I used to be the PR director at SUNO, at Southern University of New Orleans. And part of what I did as well was I did sports information. So I spent a lot of time around the track and field team at SUNO. And to watch them prepare so long for one run, one, and to watch them. And I remember, a lot of them were Jamaicans. And I remember this brother who was like the assistant coach. And I remember watching him get so technical with the runners, and he would say, he's like, no man, what you did there, that was rubbish, man. No, poke your butt up out of the blocks, man. Make sure, no, man, this is horrible, man. Look at your stance, man. I mean, and he was so technical with this one dude because he saw that if this one runner did it right, he could blow the competition away. Right. But the technical part took weeks. I mean, weeks.
And I think that's a big habit. Yeah, I think that's the piece that a lot of people miss, whether it's parents who are trying to understand their children who have these artistic tendencies or what have you, is there's an assumption that if you are a creative person, and everyone is creative in some respect, but if you are someone who specifically is creative in an artistic space, that it requires no effort, right? That is just, you're playing around, basically, is the thought, right? Like this is not really work, right? Versus, I mean, Jamal can tell you, if he's preparing for a show, he'll spend hours with the script on a daily basis to get it to where it needs to be. So
I mean, go ahead. Think of the greatest of what Stevie Wonder's 5 albums in the 70s. Those are they're crafted of years of so much work. And I think another thing that we lose sight of with great artists or dedicated artists is that this is something they do if they weren't getting paid for it. They should be. But it's something. Prince had to make music. Right. He had no choice. His body, that's what he is, So I think that's another thing that gets lost upon when parents are like, oh, I'm worried about my child. If a child is really an artist or if they're really that creative, they're going to have to do it anyway. There's no way you're going to stop.
They won't be able to function anyway. It's basically like telling a bird, don't be a bird.
Right.
How do I not be a bird?
Right.
So that really explains something that I saw often when I worked in radio. Because in radio, you would see these artists. By the way, you're listening to the For Our Edification podcast. Khalilah Elliott and Jamal Sterling are my guests here. They're the hosts of whatever. I keep thinking about Tony. Anyway.
Whatever we want. Maybe that's why Jamal always misremembers the name of our show. We always do it. Yeah, he always struggles when we're doing our intro. It's like, it's whatever we want, Jamal. It's your show. Why can't you remember the name of your show? Maybe that's why. Maybe he's remembering that Tony song.
You know what? Jamal has a problem. Anyway, so
several.
But it really brings me back to this whole notion, Khalilah, of people, taking a look at what we do in marketing and communications. They look at the creative part, but they don't realize that we work a lot to get to that creative part. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. But what I was about to say before is I used to always, when I was in radio, I remember I would look at these artists And I would look at them, they would come to the radio station, they would be on the downside of their careers doing these interviews, trying to get something sparked up again. And you're sitting there going, man, I really want to see this artist come back alive, but what's wrong?
Yeah.
Well, working in radio, one of the things that I found out was they basically got into these contracts where it was creativity on demand, and that just didn't work. Nope. And that's what happened with Prince, because he had this contract with Warner Brothers,
right?
And you got to do so many albums. You have to do it. You have to be done by such and such a deadline. And anybody who knows a musician knows that if the creativity, if the inspiration doesn't hit them right, they are not going to come out with a good product. So to tell them you have to have a new song by next week, let's say July 5th, you have to have a new song by next week. If they are not getting that inspiration, that new song is not going to come. And it's not going to be the hit that the debut was, because back then they were taking their time with stuff.
Right.
But now you have them on this tight timeline, and you're trying to give them a business goal, and you're trying to make the business goal happen on a very tight creative schedule.
Right.
And that happens a lot with these artists. And when people start saying, why were albums 1 through 5 were the bomb, albums 6 through 10 were just straight garbage, but they kept making it and it was horrible. And that's what happens a lot of times,
you can't force creativity. You can't force it. That's a downside to it.
What's the saying they have? You have forever to make your first hit album. You got like a year to make your second.
And that is pretty much how it works. So let me shift gears on something, because we were having a meeting at work, and we were talking about creativity in this meeting. And one of the things that I said, because the meeting was kind of dragging, and my boss was going, okay, I want everybody to really own your space, and I want everybody to really reach that creative part. Now, I understood what he was saying, but I don't think the rest of the team understood what he was saying. They were thinking of creativity in terms of arts and crafts.
Right.
But what he was saying was come up with solutions and go a different route.
Think outside the box.
Think outside the box. He was trying to say that.
Use a different part of your brain.
Yeah. And one of the things I suggested to them was, and I think I scared the bejesus everybody when I said this, I said, I think one of the barriers to creativity is imposter syndrome. If you don't think you belong in the room, there's no way you're going to take a risk.
1,000%. Right.
Preach.
Yeah.
You're not going to take a risk, because you're sitting here going, if I take a risk and I get it wrong, everybody's going to think I'm worthless.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, Jamal, have you ever had a point where you were really afraid of a certain role or doing a certain thing in a role, and you had to tell yourself, Jamal, you got this. There's a reason you got the part.
But okay.
Don't
early
say no.
on, no, wait,
say no. Don't make me hate you, man.
It's like, no, that's never happened to me, Eddie.
I'm digging deep.
Do not go full beta phi alpha on me, sir.
So listen. Really? In our dear? No. Anyway, early on when I was living in LA, I was obsessed with the show ER. Obsessed. It's to this day one of my favorite shows. And I had a horrible agent, a terrible agent. Won't say his name here. Anyway, I've been beating down these doors because I was like, it's the last season of ER. The last season. I was like, man, I gotta get on this show. So finally, through digging, I get the call, hey, you got an audition for ER, one scene with Noah Wiley. I'm like, yo,
Mama, I made it.
Yeah, right. I'm like, I don't believe this. And I did the original audition, did great, got called back. It's me and 3 other dudes. And I walked into the room. The creator of ER was there. And then I don't remember anything else. Wow. I walked out of the room. I blew it big time, because the minute I walked in that room, I was so shook. And I was like, man, I've reached this dream. And then and something inside me, body's like, yeah, but you're not ready. You're not supposed to be here. You've seen this show. What right do you have to be on this show? So quite honestly, I walked into that room, and when I tell you guys, I honestly blank and do not remember. I remember walking out of the room and going, dang. because you put so much pressure on yourself and there's been a goal and you feel like, I've seen Eric LaSalle, I've seen Mekhi Phifer, I've seen Omar Epps, I've seen all these dudes I've looked up to. And I'm like, and it was a part of me, the 20-year-old me was like, I'm not them dudes. I'm not them dudes. And it took me leaving LA and then figuring out why I do this, because I don't do this this is going to sound really strange and artistically, I don't do it to be on TV. I honestly don't. I don't do it. I do it because I have to do it. I do it because I want to tell stories. And once you have that security in yourself and once you get grounded in what this means to you and what's really important in your life, you get back in those rooms again, it's nothing. So when I do an episode of Dallas, it's like, yeah, this dude I'm acting against, yeah, he's everybody knows who he is. I should be in a room with this dude. And I think that's the biggest barrier to me in my career early on was feeling like I belonged. And now I belong.
Yeah.
You best believe I belong.
So let me go back to something you said really quickly. You said, I have to do this. What does that mean?
I wish I knew. It's just, the thing is that you can ask Kay, who's been around me all during the pandemic. When I'm not on stage, it's not good.
It's that I'm a bird and I have to be a bird
right.
thing.
I'm
like,
not doing
yeah.
right. I'm not doing what I was intended to do. There's some dudes you see who's like, you put Stevie Wonder in the studio, he's going to do one thing. There's certain dudes who build stuff. There's certain dudes I got a student who, when you put him in front of a car, this kid in other classes cannot do anything. You put that boy in front of a car and he's found what God has intended him to do.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So that's just what it is. I can't, I wish I could sometimes. Oh, some days I wish I could.
Yeah.
But I can't.
It's funny because I think that's what this podcast is for me. Like, I have to do this.
Right.
Because radio just got into my blood.
Yeah.
And I knew I wasn't going to be doing theater. I knew I wasn't going to be doing movies, but I had to express myself somehow.
Yep. Yeah.
I had to.
And anybody who heard you back in the day knows that you were built for that.
I mean, listen to your voice. I mean,
Right.
How could you not? You clearly are a communicator.
Thank you.
I just wanted to jump in here. I just wanted to jump in here too and say, I think there's another side to this coin, which is, so we're talking about this, I call it divine purpose, which is I believe each and every one of us has a divine ordered destiny, a purpose on this earth. We're supposed to do certain things. And I think for like in the case of Jamal, if you've seen Jamal, there's no question. He is meant to be an actor. He's meant to be an educator. Like he is great at those things. He understands his craft and he understands how to teach other people about the craft. Right. But I think there's another side to it. Look, that's as nice as I'm going to be to you for the rest of the week. Okay. But there's another side to it, which is, so there's the creative who feels this sense of, I have to do this because I don't know how to do anything else. And then there are creatives, and I'm like this, who can do a lot of different things. And so you sometimes can suffer from analysis paralysis, this sense of, I can do a lot of things well. What am I supposed to do? Right. Like, because Jamal and I went through the same, theater training program. He and we acted together. He can tell you I can I got decent chops, right? But
she's a beast. She's a beast.
Right? I mean, I wouldn't go that far, but I might. But I was like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And it took me time to figure out that while I am a communicator and while I am an artist, how I actually, perform in that way turned out to be different than what I thought. I actually realized, I'm meant to be a producer. I'm meant to be on the back end and be doing a lot of the, the business side of this work. And it can be hard because that's not something that's seen as creative, but it is, right? Yeah. And so a lot of times it's the flip side to that is figuring out, if you don't have a concrete, definitive, I'm a bird, but I know I'm a creative. Like, I know I'm an animal, but what kind of animal am I, right? Like, so there's the other part of that, understanding that creativity, going back to our earlier topic, goes beyond the obvious, I'm going to produce a piece of art, or a performance, right? It can be that you are creatively expressing yourself through another, means. So.
And Khalilah, it's almost as if, creativity takes a lot of fearlessness too. And it's almost as if, like, going back to your animal reference, it can be scary to try to figure out what kind of animal you really are. You're like, am I a bird? Am I a dog? I'm a chupacabra.
Yeah. And that's exactly what the process feels like too. Like, I thought I was a bird. I'm not a bird. I'm a dog. No, now you're telling me I'm a caterpillar? What am I today, Lord?
Exactly. He's like, nah, you know what? I'm an animal that doesn't exist. I'm a Bigfoot. Well, Bigfoot do exist. I don't know, but I am that, so it's so Khalilah, in your line of work, what's it like to have to talk somebody off the ledge though? When you have somebody who gets to that point where they kind of stall creatively and you're sitting there going, well, the reason we're working together is you can do this and you have done it. I mean, what's it like to have to really have to pull something out of somebody so they can do what it is that they can do?
Absolutely. And I would say this goes even beyond the creative space. I think Jamal and I are both people who mentor particularly younger people. And I think, but even outside of that, we just often find ourselves in positions of kind of like, I don't want to say authority, but leadership, right? You find yourself as like a de facto leader, even among your friends. Sometimes they come to you for advice. And so I think it starts with knowing yourself. I don't think you can speak into other people's lives when you don't really truly know who you are. Jamal can tell you, we talk a lot. He made a transition a couple years ago to acting full time, right? And that meant reducing his work as an educator. We had a conversation about that. Like literally, he called me up. I was still in New York at the time. He was like, "Listen, friend, I'm struggling. I can't keep doing this." And I was like, so we had a conversation about it, right? As his friend who knows his talents and his gifts, I was like, "Bruh, talk to your wife, make sure y'all good on that front in terms of financially. But if you can't sleep at night, not doing what if you're a bird and you're not flying, then you gotta push yourself, right?" And so what I appreciated about him in that moment, and what I appreciate about our friendship in general, and to get to your point, is I think part of being able to mentor people or encourage them is honestly being solid in yourself. He wouldn't have called me if my life was a mess, right? He would have been like, "Hey, I need some advice," knowing I'm not pursuing my dreams, I'm not pursuing my passion. And so I think you can speak from a place of authenticity and speak, and encouraging people when you are truly pursuing what you're supposed to pursue. So now we have a lot of creative conversations. I mean, the podcast literally came out of us having so many conversations about so many things going, and people telling us we didn't think up the podcast. Literally, people were like, "Y'all need a show.
Yeah, y'all need to record this.
Y'all need to be recording this," right? And so, and honestly, it came out of people observing our debates and our discussions, because we're hilarious when we fight. But also people hearing that there's love and there's friendship at the core of it all. And so I go back to that. So whether you're talking to young people or whether you're talking to your friends, you've got to speak from a place of authenticity. People don't follow people who don't actually live out what they're encouraging you to do. So don't tell people, be creative, take a chance, pursue your passion. If you've never done that, you really can't do that.
Right.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. I was having a conversation, a name you would both recognize, Dr. Mona Lisa Saloy.
Mona Lisa Saloy.
Yeah. So I was having a conversation with her because, there's we rolled out a podcast at Dillard called Conversations on the Oaks. And so I had a conversation with her about poetry. It was National Poetry Month. And one of the things I asked her was, why is creativity so scary for people? And she said, there's no safety net. And I see what she means. I mean, if I want to be a salesperson and I'm really good at selling stuff, I'm going to have a job. I'm going to have a job.
Right.
If I'm the salesperson who decides that I'm going to be a music artist because every day and every night I'm thinking of music and I'm always tapping on my piano and I'm sitting there going, I have an idea for a song. Wait, I got another idea for a song.
Right.
But I can't dedicate any time to music because I'm on the road as a salesman all the friggin' time.
Right.
There's no safety net in music like there is in sales when you have a check coming and you have commission coming.
Right.
And you got another job around the corner if you need it, because everybody needs salespeople. So,
but can I just jump in here and tell you? But I think
it's scary though.
It is, but can I just say that's the illusion? That's the illusion that we've been taught, is that something like sales is easier. And here's why I say that. I told Jamal this years ago. The reason I actually actively chose to not pursue acting is because it took me not too long after graduating from Dillard to go, so you mean I got to go on auditions, I got to do headshots, I got to go classes, I got to get in front of agents, I've got to continually convince 80% of acting, if this is what we're talking about, acting in this context, is marketing yourself. Mm-hmm. That's what they don't tell you. We spend so much time focused on the art and the craft, which of course you have to, but there's a business aspect to being a creative. And so the common misconception is that it's easier to do sales or it's easier to do something like that, when in fact, and it is, if that's your gift, if that's your talent, right? There's space for that. But there's this idea that somehow being a creative is a scary thing. And it's most often scary because we don't generally know people who are in that space and who've done it, and we can look to for advice and a roadmap, especially in our community, right? Because I know when I graduated from Dillard, I remember my first job outside of Dillard was working at the Phoenix airport, right? And I was antsy and I was ready to get into something creative, and I will never forget my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother messaged me and said, "You got a good government job, baby. Why you?" Because in her mind, I've got a stable, steady income. Stick with that employer and ride it out, right? Without understanding that there's risk even in that. Because literally within 2 years of that, 9/11 happened. Right. Yeah. So I say that to say that is a good talking point that we have all, especially within our community, bought into, that you can't make a living as a creative. It's scary out there as a creative, when it's scary anywhere. Listen, we just came off of a pandemic. Prior to that, we dealt with a crash, the crash of folks who are working in the financial industry. Nothing is safe and solid, right? There's no guaranteed path. So why not do what you know you're supposed to be doing?
But for me, it's the scarier thing is working in something for 20 years that's outside of your passion.
Heck yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, like, no distant, but like, I remember when I was in LA, one of those horrible jobs, I was working at the Gap in the middle of the night. I stocked shelves at the Gap in the middle of the night and took auditions in the daytime. Yeah. You know, talk about a nightmare. Nightmare is like, I'm not no distant to the Gap. You love the Gap.
Right.
And you work
absolutely.
That's your gift. But for me, it was like, what is going on? I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. That's the nightmare. That's the scary part.
Well, but okay. So if you talk about people in other disciplines, I mean, you know, so let's talk about business people. Let's talk about somebody who was a manager at a place like the Gap, and they say, you know what, this is my space, and I'm not going to just be a manager here. I'm going to become a regional manager.
That's the divine purpose. That's what I said earlier.
I love retail. I wake up every day and I think about what the displays are going to look like. I wake up every day and I think,
but even that's a risk, because that business can go out of business tomorrow.
Yeah,
so we think that those are guaranteed jobs and guaranteed industries, when in fact everything is up in the air. Anything can happen at any point. If we have learned anything in the last year, it's that anything can happen. So are you going to pursue that which feels safest to you? And listen, Jamal just got through talking about the job he had. Listen, there are times when as an adult, you have to make the responsible choice and do what is safest. Yeah. We're not saying don't quit your job, y'all. Right?
Please don't quit your job.
But you do, but you do need a plan. You need to figure out a plan to be able to figure out a way to be able to move into your purpose. Most people don't even think about it. If your purpose is to be a doctor, you don't just walk in there and start doing surgery. You actually have to start making a plan, go to school, get training, all of those things. Working in a creative space is no different. You have to have a plan to develop yourself. And truthfully, and I know I've been talking a lot, but truthfully, the other thing I will say too is there's also this question, and Jamal says something really important at the top, which is his goal was not to be on TV and to be famous. That's what a lot of people think about when they think about creatives, right? Yes. They think if everybody doesn't know your name and can't Google your IMDb and and your grandma didn't see you on the billboard in the middle of Hollywood and on television, then you're not an artist. And that's just not true. And that's part of the deception and part of the challenge that we have in trying to get people, convincing people that they can pursue their passions, is they think if they're not making the big money and everybody doesn't know them, then it's not valid. And if you can't get past that, you will not be able to be a successful creative.
Amen, girl. Amen. you speaking my language.
Yeah. And the point I was going to make about somebody who loves retail is they love it so much, it really brings something creative out of them. You know, that even somebody in the financial industry, I mean, they find that creative part of them. That's why they love finance so much, because they can create solutions. They can find a different way to do things. It was really funny. So with me, it was really funny because I worked in radio. I did radio for about 20 years. I actually got to a point where I hated it. I was just like, this isn't working for me. It's not working for me. So I made this crazy, leap of faith transition to public relations. And I actually wound up falling in love with higher ed. And then I fell in love with doing PR and marketing in higher ed. And then I got to Dallas, and I did more of it right there. Things didn't work out for whatever reason. I jumped to recruiting and I was like, oh God, so now what? Now I got to learn a whole new industry. I don't even know I don't know if this is where I need to be, if this is where I want to be. But I found I found myself creatively in recruiting. So I fell in love with doing resumes and helping people with their resumes. And so the thing that I learned was, okay, I have to, because creativity is so important to me, I have to find where I can hit my creative stride no matter what I do.
Right.
But I also know there are certain places that aren't going to work for me. And I remember when I was looking at recruiting jobs at one point, there was a really nice recruiting job in the financial sector. And I was just like, no, that's not going to work. I'm like, that is not going to work. That's going to be, I feel like I'm going to be watching paint dry if I work in the financial sector. And then it was working in math and sciences. I'm working in a STEM field as a PR person. And I'm going, no, because I remember working with those doggone STEM professors and nope. Right. So what happened was that I got back to New Orleans, the opportunity at Dillard came available. And I really, really, really wanted to be a Dillard. I mean, really, like I remember I told somebody, even though I have a lot of friends at Dillard, even though I've known, President Kimbrough, I've known him for about 20 years or so. My boss, I've known him for about 30 years. So I knew the people there. But the thing that I remember telling folks was I had to explicitly tell them in the interviews, I want to work here for the long term. You got me. If you hire me, you got me for a long time. And I say all this to say that I learned that doing PR and marketing in higher ed really helped me reach a very important creative place in me. But it also satisfied another side where I started asking myself, well, I know the PR side really well. I need to figure out the marketing side a lot more. And that really got my brain in a different place, where I started to go more into business and started to understand the business aspect of what I was doing a lot more. And so my message to people in saying this is, at one point, I loved what I was doing. I lost the opportunity and I didn't feel creatively, even though I found my creative stride in recruiting, I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel fulfilled. I just wasn't fulfilled. But when I got back into PR marketing and higher ed, I started feeling fulfilled again. And I kept telling people, hold on to that feeling, hold on to it, and don't ever, ever, ever take it for granted. Right. Because being out of higher ed, it got on my nerves. It really got on my nerves.
You said something though in there that I find especially interesting, because this is something that for me is a must in any work that I do. And you mentioned that the marketing aspect of the work that you do is not something that you had done a lot before. And for me, whether I'm taking on a new project with a client or if I'm in a job, I always know when it's time to go when I stop feeling challenged. So I actually like to be in spaces. And I think that's something that most creative people, they like to be in spaces where they're constantly growing and learning and evolving. The minute you stop learning, it's like, well, why am I here? Like, I'm not any good to you because I'm not growing and learning. And that's literally how creativity, how you get to be able to produce creative works, is constantly expanding your worldview, constantly, being introduced to new ideas, new people, and so the idea of, I think to your earlier point about imposter syndrome, I think that's what people miss, is they don't see a lack of knowledge as something as an opportunity. They see it as an obstacle, right? Like they see it as, I can't do this because I don't know how to do this. Well, that's the fun part, right? That's where the creativity enters, because now you get to explore and see and learn new things. So for me, that's always a plus sign. If I'm, like I said, if it's a new project, a new client or whatever, is this something I haven't done before? Is that a muscle I want to learn how to flex? That gets my juices going.
Yeah. You know what it is? It's that point where you get to that question. So what can I do with this?
Right.
What can I do with this? All right, I'm going to do something with this. I'm going to do something different. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna do something so different. I'm gonna make a whole lot of people nervous,
including yourself most often. Yes.
But I did learn. I think this is the other interesting thing about creativity, and either one of you chime in on this one. I do think that there's this part of creativity that you're doing it right when you do make people nervous.
Right.
Because,
especially yourself.
Yeah. But when you see people going, well, we've never done that before. And it's like, oh, really? Good.
Right. It's that tightrope, man.
That's the disruptor in you. Go ahead.
But it's always that tightrope. You're just walking, and you want to walk without a net when you're living in your purpose, right? So like, I think that you have to always be pushing yourself on the edge. The best artists, all the best artists we've ever known have always been trying to recreate themselves. The David Bowies, the Jeffrey Wrights, the Anthony Hopkins, they're always dancing on that edge of, this is brand new. How does this work? And that's the most exciting thing on earth, as opposed to doing the same rote thing over and over again.
You know what? Anthony Hopkins said something. I was watching an interview with him on Inside the Actor Studio, and he was talking about how he developed Hannibal Lecter. And one of the things he said, and it was hilarious. I haven't watched Inside the Actor Studio in so long, but I love that show. And I remember he said that when he was developing the character, he said, I was sitting there and I was thinking, well, how am I going to make Hannibal Lecter? And I thought that if I wanted him to be kind of insane, I just couldn't go. Blah, 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 blah. He said, but he said that's how he got to the part of insanity being, hello, Clarice. And it was, and I was sitting there going, and I'm sitting there, the actor in me is going, oh,
because it's brilliant. It's counterintuitive. It's like you would go, as opposed to just playing everything deliberate and distinct and
right. It's so funny because so you mentioned at the top of the show, the name of my company is Chief Disruptor Productions, and that's how I landed on it. This idea of, we don't want to do what everybody does. We want to come in and break it up, and I think that's what truly creative people do. They look at how things are in the status quo and they go, how can we do this better? Right? How can I push myself to do it a little different?
Khalilah, what was it like for you when you put a client in that scary place? Because clients, every time you tell them
they are risk averse
different,
most of the time.
Every time you tell them we're going to do something different, they're like, okay, fine. And it sounds beautiful in a meeting.
Yeah.
In a meeting, you're like, oh yeah, we're going to do something. We're going to take a different approach.
Right.
And then you actually get into the project and you're like, okay, I think we need to go in this direction.
Yeah.
And they're going, well, no, wait, hold on now.
Yeah.
In higher ed, especially at HBCUs.
Oh yeah.
You tell folks you're going in a different direction. Like you decide, like at Dillard, there are certain photos I'll use, and people are going, oh, I use that picture. and I'm sitting here going, because this student looks so interesting.
Right.
This student is at a lecture, and he looks interested in this lecture,
as opposed to generic.
Right. Stock photo. Right.
As opposed to the generic.
Yeah. So random guy number one.
So Khalilah, when you get on the other side of the project and the client says, okay, now I see what you were doing. I mean, what are those conversations like? How do you manage those objections along the way?
So I am a disruptor. It is my natural. I naturally go the hard way, and this sounds crazy, and it's probably terrible in some respects, but it's also got me to where I am, so I can't be too mad at it. But I've always kind of, wherever the crowd goes, I always go in the opposite direction. It's hurt me a few times in life. It's been where I've missed out what felt like me missing out on opportunities. I always classically use the example of Pledge at Delta, right? Like I wanted to pledge at Beta Gamma, but I didn't want to go to my mentor to get a letter of recommendation because everybody was going to my mentor to get a letter of recommendation. So I went to someone else, right? An artist, interestingly enough. And then I found out that she wasn't financial. So I ended up not being able to get to Delta because the person I chose, because I wanted to do something different. So there are instances, so that I use that as an example of, there are times in which going against the status quo can hurt you. Now, ultimately, because it was my destiny to build Delta, ultimately it all worked out, right? And that's what I believe in life. I believe, and honestly, that's how I present it to my clients or to anybody I work with, have worked with over the years, that we're taking a risk. And part of the risk is that this might not work, right? Like you have to be honest and saying that this is because if you're the project manager or you're leading a client down a path, you have to be candid in saying what the risks are. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But part of the risks too is being honest about what are the risks if we don't take this chance? What are the risks if we don't break outside the box? Because if we're doing it the way we've always done it, if the intent is to grow and expand, whether that's to meet a new fundraising goal, if the goal is to bring greater awareness to your brand, if you're doing what you've always done, you already know what that's going to get you. Right. So we're trying something new now. It might not work and we may have to go back and try something else, but you've got to buckle in for that ride. That's part of the process. So I think honestly, it's not sugarcoating it, going, because we try something new, it's going to be amazing. We're going to try something new and we're hoping it works. If it doesn't, we'll go back to the drawing board. You just have to be honest with people, I think.
So to all my colleagues who do PR and marketing at HBCUs, I want you to listen to what she just said. I want you to know,
everything does not stick.
You to know that good PR and marketing people, when they want to use the weird picture with the weird lighting, it's not because
there's a reason. Yes, we want your work to stand out in the crowd, right? If everybody's here's the thing: stock photos. This is a perfect example. Everybody goes to the same website, Getty, to get the same stock photo images. If we're all using the same thing for the customer, what does that look like? It looks like we're all selling the same thing. So if I come in or my client comes in and they use something totally out the box, weird or whatever, now all of a sudden it's that first, going back to Apple, is that very first time Apple released a commercial. If you remember in the beginning, Apple didn't do commercials. Right. And then when they dropped commercials, they showed these silhouettes with people with these wild, crazy hairstyles doing backflips and all this other stuff. And then they had our attention in a way they hadn't before. Yeah. In comparison to Android, Samsung, who were not releasing anything. And now here we are, the cult of Apple. You know what I'm saying? Like, so there's a reason that works.
Listen, you too. I gotta really thank y'all for the conversation, because this was extraordinarily cool. It was kind of a therapy session, by the way. I snuck that in on y'all, and don't send me your bills. But thank you very much, Khalilah Elliott, the Chief Disruptor, and Jamal. Detroit stand up.
Detroit original. Shout out to Detroit. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh my God. Thank you for having us on, Eddie. We sure do appreciate it. We appreciate it.
Got it.
Oh, and you can tell your audience they can follow us on whatever we want with J and K.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah. The cross promotion thing definitely
works.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, so yeah, you're gonna have to come on our show now so we can talk about some stuff. We'll figure out when. We'll get back with you.
Oh, that's right, because I can drink on y'all show.
Yes.
You have to drink on our show.
It's a requirement. Yes.
So let's unpack this. Not being a creative doesn't mean you can't own your creativity. Creativity is often the difference between a game-changing solution and game-stalling fear. It's a risk. It's a gamble, regardless of the industry, the life situation, or the task that you have to do. Everyone in some way is going to be a little bit afraid of that creativity, but they could also benefit handsomely from that creativity. Why do you think so many job ads call for creative problem solvers? Because they know they have to do something that's going to make the organization different or better than it was. So creativity, when you think about it, is a gamble. It takes some guts. I mean, like I mentioned before, it does take fearlessness. It strips you down and it shows everyone something about your identity and your value that's pretty vulnerable. But the thing that you realize when you decide that you're going to be creative, when you decide you're going to take that risk, you're going to take that gamble, and when you realize that it's all worth it, well, what feels like vulnerability is really an opportunity for you to get stronger. So many thanks to Khalilah Elliott and Jamal Sterling for joining me on For Our Edification. Check out their podcast, by the way, Whatever We Want with J and K, on Apple, Audible, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Player FM, and more. And check out For Our Edification at eddiefrancis.com/For Our Edification. The podcast is available, of course, on your favorite platforms: iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, Google Podcasts, Apple, and more. Rate it, follow it, share it with friends, make a comment if you want. That's cool too. For Dr. Halim Malik Francis, I'm Eddie Francis. Thank you so much for downloading this edition of For Our Edification.